So, we've already heard about what gender norms are and how strongly they influence all of us in our daily lives. Our world as it is today is sadly shaped by gender inequality. And this is especially true for women in rural areas of developing countries. The constraints that they face are significant. They're well documented, and we know that they include cash crops like coffee. But is this also true for specialty coffee? Or is it irrelevant because specialty is produced and traded in a different way than mainstream coffee? To have a better look at this, let's have a look at 4 attributes, characteristics that maybe distinguish specialty from mainstream coffee: quality, trade, knowledge, and relationships. Quality is very straightforward. We want the best quality, excellency. Trade, the way specialty coffee is traded. It doesn't matter if you call it direct trade, relationship coffee, fairly traded. It seems to be about being more ethical than other coffees. And we're trying to do this through higher prices, premiums, and transparency throughout the value chain. Knowledge. There's so much information in specialty coffee. It matters to us to know about altitudes, varieties, harvesting times. The relationships with our producers. The more direct, the better. Many specialty roasters seem to be on a first-name basis with the producers and genuinely care about them. Let me illustrate what I mean with this by a few quotes that I found that are very typical for what I often read. We have meaningful relationships with the farmers. We believe in a strong connection between farmer, roaster, barista, and our customers. These are very emotional, very strong quotes about what these roasters want to achieve. The next one. Sourcing means more than just paying farmers a fair price. It means working with them to improve their coffee and their livelihoods. Another strong quote about how ethical that coffee is, that it's more about just paying farmers a fair price. It's about their livelihoods. And the last one, it is important to us to avoid too many merchants so that a higher value goes back to the farm. This one actually also claimed that the setup was far beyond what fair trade could achieve. So the bottom line is, the more direct, the better. We improve farmers' livelihoods, and we do this better than anyone else, including third-party verification. So this all sounds very beautiful, and I personally love the idea that specialty coffee is, in some way, better for producers or more ethical. But to me, these assumptions are not right. To me, assuming that a higher price or premiums are necessarily better for the producers is wrong. And it has to do with gender equality or inequality. Let's have a look at quality. When we talk about quality, it's mainly about improving quality, it's about ensuring consistency. We do this normally through training or through some kind of dialogue, communication. Who do you train? Who do you dialogue with? When I started in coffee in 2008, I worked for a sustainability standard. And for a certain project, we worked together with a company and trained coffee farmers in South Sumatra. So whenever I went to the field at that time, I found myself surrounded by a team of agronomists, all male. And look who we trained. All the pictures I have from that time look the same. We only invited men to the trainings. Sometime later, I joined one of the biggest coffee merchants as sustainability manager, this time in the north of Sumatra and Aceh. This was a company at that time very advanced in sustainability. We were proud that we employed more agronomists than traders. We did everything, quality, productivity, sustainability, through our presence on the ground. The relationships that our agronomists had with the farmers were everything. So, I started my job and I inherited a team of agronomists. No surprise, they were all male. And yes, they had spent the previous years inviting the male parts of the smallholder farmer households to the trainings and registering them for our supply chains. Now, as you all may know, registration brings a lot with it. Status, premiums are certainly going to be paid to the person who has their name put down. Certifications are in the name of the person that has their name put down. Well, it turns out that in North Sumatra and Aceh, women are mainly responsible for coffee production. Of the total of 15 coffee-producing tasks in North Sumatra, women were mainly responsible for 13 of them. 13 out of 15. And they did those additionally to the housework. So you can imagine how many hours a day they worked and how many hours a day men worked. Namely 15.5 on average and men 8.5. So it was the women who prepared the land, who bought the seedlings, did the weeding, harvesting, pulping. And yet here we were, one of the world's biggest green coffee exporter, proud of training thousands of smallholder farmers every year. And we had kind of not managed to get those people to the trainings that needed that knowledge. Why is it a problem? Imagine me in a half-day workshop on roasting. I have never roasted before and I don't tend to take it up in the next near future. So having me sit in this workshop is a waste of everyone's time, energy and money. I don't need that knowledge. I have never roasted before, so I won't be able to ask specific questions. And most likely, I won't be able to take those 4 hours of training, go home and explain all of that to an actual roaster who might have specific questions. And that's exactly what happened in our trainings. Personally, I'm very convinced that that knowledge was lost. Those men did not go home and train their wives on how to prune. And look at pruning. It is important to practice, to interact with a trainer. So, who do you train? Who do you communicate with when you talk to producers about quality? Let's look at trade. I read often statements like, we strive to work with cooperatives in Eastern Africa that pay back up to 90% back to the farmers. That sounds impressive, but what does that actually mean? Let's look at these East African cooperatives. In Kenya, coffee is traditionally a man's crop. Men on the land, so they own the trees growing on it. When in fact, the women do all the labor, or at least most of it. But women are not members of cooperatives. Why? Well, again, they don't have trees, they don't have land, and you have to be able to supply to be a member. Then secondly, there are time and labor constraints. As I just said, this is true for women in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Eastern Africa. Women spend a disproportionate time of their time on unpaid labor. These women in Kenya literally didn't have time to engage in a cooperative. And thirdly, there are sociocultural barriers. Perceptions of what is accepted behavior for a woman. In Kenya, it means you should be staying in the household sphere. Everything outside the household sphere, public sphere, not a good thing. So this means that the actual producers of most of Kenyan coffee, women, are absolutely underrepresented in cooperatives. It doesn't matter if you look at membership, as employees, or as leaders. This woman, a chair lady of a cooperative, is very much an exception, and she faces many struggles on a day-to-day basis. So, when we talk about trade, how do you know that the premiums you're paying are really going back to the producers? How ethical is the coffee that you just sourced when it was actually produced by a woman that even carried that heavy bag of cherries on her back to the vet mill while her husband walks next to her? I don't know if you've seen this. She puts the bag down, he takes the money, including the premium, and spends it on beer. And I'm not exaggerating here. Alcohol abuse was a major problem in the region in Kenya that I just visited. Knowledge and relationships. In specialty, it matters to us to know a lot, have precise information, altitudes, varieties, harvest time, relationships to our producers. We want to improve livelihoods. So then I read about a specialty roaster's origin project in Kenya. And when they described the relationship that the producer has with the cooperative, that was written. Whenever he has a consignment ready, he delivers the parchment to the mill. And this is not surprising. This happens all the time. Many people think that a farmer is a man. And this is not a coffee-specific problem. This is much bigger than coffee. If you'd ask those ladies who the producer is, who the farmer is, they would actually themselves point at their husbands, saying these are the farmers. They themselves just do the work in the fields. They don't see themselves as producers. So, if we wanted to improve livelihoods, and we are so good at collecting data, wouldn't it be time that we collect some data or information about the struggles that our female producers actually face and spread that? So why does gender equality matter? 2 points. The first one, the clear business case. It matters to address it because it has a huge impact on quality and productivity. It matters if you spend your training budget on training the right people or not. It matters if you know where those premiums are going. And if you want to improve livelihoods of farmers, it is the women that you should connect with, because in most of those countries, it's women who reinvest in the farms and in the households. The second reason why it matters: if you're sourcing from smallholder farmers in countries, in developing countries, where women are discriminated against, especially in rural areas, and you're not addressing it, you are reinforcing them. There's no neutrality here. So what did we do after we realized that, or I realized with my well-intended sustainability work, I was actually increasing gender inequalities? First of all, I tried to sensitize my team, that the people in the office as well as the field both understood the importance of this. Then I tried to make my team more diverse, which meant finding female agronomists. And I cannot stress enough how important female agronomists are in reaching out to female farmers. However, I was told repeatedly, they don't exist, there are no women who want to do this job, or women shouldn't be doing this job. And I actually hear this until today, I just heard it last week. Luckily, it's not true. Yes, it's a bit more difficult finding female agronomists, but they are out there and they make a big difference. Female farmers, we had to find out why they weren't participating in training. Sometimes it was basic things like, well, time constraints that I mentioned. Sometimes it was distance, traveling to the training. Sometimes it was something like, what am I going to do with my children? Well, they could bring children to the training. We had to talk to their husbands. We had to explain to the men why it was important that their wives came to training. And yes, gender equality is a very complex topic. The women in North Sumatra had very different needs and faced different challenges than the women in Aceh, just a few hours away. But despite those complexities, I do believe that there are some universal best practices. I've been working with Nespresso for a while now on finding out what these are so that Nespresso can implement those in their supply chains. For this, I went to Kenya to, have a look at what we're doing there. And Nespresso is working very closely with TechnoServe in East Africa. So I was truly delighted to see that TechnoServe as an organization doesn't just take gender equality serious. No, they were taking it to a different level. Gender equality was part of every operational aspect, from how do we get women to trainings, to how do we deal with cooperatives, to changing the recruitment process of agronomists. How do we get women to apply for the position of an agronomist, taking into consideration that women have very low level of confidence and maybe wouldn't even apply in the first place. So they changed this, and the figures are really amazing. Overall, the global percentage of female extension officers is 15%. Nespresso is already doing very well. I just did the figures a few weeks ago, and they have 30% female agronomists worldwide, which is double. But in the countries where they work with TechnoServe, with all their dedication, in both Kenya and Ethiopia, we have over 40% female agronomists. And these are not countries that are easy to get female agronomists. And having those women on board makes such a big difference, not just for farmer trainings and talking to cooperatives. This is Christine. When she grew up, which is not too long ago, she was convinced cars were for men because they were valuable and they required some kind of skill driving, so certainly nothing for women. Women don't own anything, they can't do anything. So she only started driving a car because of that job with Nespresso as an agronomist. So I had the pleasure to spend a week next to her in a pickup truck, and I saw how heads would turn in rural areas, how people would turn around when they realized it was a young woman driving that truck. Imagine what a difference she or 18-year-old Valeria, another farmer trainer, make when they arrive at cooperatives or at farmers' houses and deliver agronomy training in a confident way. So now, obviously, my experience is based on companies who have hundreds of agronomists on the ground, millions of data and do M&E and are able to actually work with partners who bring specific knowledge to the table. I can only imagine how difficult it must be when you're a smaller roaster based in the US and Europe and you're busy roasting, cupping, whatever else is involved, to get to this deep knowledge of understanding the gender relationships in one particular community, or even more when you source from more. So what can you do? How much control do you have when you don't have hundreds of agronomists? I don't have solutions, I just have a few thoughts. The first one would be, start with yourself and your team. Gender equality is nothing that just matters at origin, it matters everywhere. And only a gender-aware team can bring change, both at origin and wherever you're based. Secondly, stay humble. Don't think that social sustainability issues such as something as complex and delicate as child labor or gender equality is something that you can quickly read up on. Approach it with the same attitude that you approached roasting, cupping. There is a lot one has to know before you can be sure you're doing the right thing. This has a direct impact on human beings in very vulnerable positions. So if you're not sure, maybe visit a training course on gender equality or get an expert on board that helps you figuring out what to do. The third one, find out who your producers are, who is producing your coffee, and where are those premiums going. And the last one, there's a growing number of gender initiatives in coffee out there. Engage with them. Thank you.